Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
A preamble. I was married to a very OCD and pragmatic man. For example, for him, a big romantic gesture had been to leave me alone for 24 hours at the hospital right after I had our son, so he could go pay bills and mow the lawn. 20 years later, I do understand. He really did express love this way. But that's another story. The story is not about him, it's only a preamble. So I divorced him not just for what's above, mind you. I felt alone and unloved in this relationship. I just wrote about it to explain the state of mind I was in when I met this other person that we will call PS. PS was a total opposite. He was very in tune with his emotions. He was a very intense guy, this will be important later, and he really expressed love like I thought I needed. He made me feel amazing. He had a huge house and a rather flashy lifestyle, so I assumed he really was well off. He told me he owned a car wash and a phone marketing company. Fast forward a bit, at this point we had been dating for about a year, and he had just asked me and my son to move in with him. I wasn't 100% sure, but he prepared a room for my son nonetheless. As I started spending more time in his house, still keep in mind, I also started to see strange behavior. He'd be up all night but sleep all day. I also overheard a few phone calls where I was telling people they owed money and needed to pay, but the conversations didn't fit with a car wash or phone marketing business. At some point, he told me he was having money problems. He said huge clients were late in paying and that it was jeopardizing his house payments. So stupid me offered to help. I'm missing a part of the story because it started as me offering help with the house since we were there a lot. Still had my house though, but it ended up with me lending him 25k. I cannot for the life of me remember that progression, but the loan was supposed to be for 3 weeks. He said I'd have it all back in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That 25k came from my retirement savings / son's college money, so I had to pay a fine to access it. It's also money it took me 10 years to put aside. That money was very important to me. During those 3 weeks, I went out to have drinks with my friends and found him on a date with another woman. I said nothing, went to his house, packed my stuff and left. So anyway, I thought he'd be an adult and would still reimburse the 25k at the end of these 3 weeks. Big mistake. Someone I knew told me he was glad I left and proceeded to tell me about him. He said PS was a junkie, hooked on GHB, hence why he was so intense and so into his emotions. That also explained the erratic sleep / night patterns, but the final blow was when he told me PS was also a con man, a specialist in defrauding older people by phone, his so-called phone marketing company. In the beginning, I wasn't sure I believed it, but then bits of what I had overheard in the last year started to make sense, and I realized it was all true. Back to this later. I tried having my money back many different ways. None worked. I was at the end of my rope, and since it was in my years post-divorce and right after the 2008-2009 economic crash as well, I was poor as hell. So this is what I did. First, he had given me access to pay bills online. Not to his bank accounts, but to his emails, so I was able to investigate all his accounts with the same password. I printed / screenshotted every little bit of information relating to money. I found proof that he was indeed scamming people and found the people he worked with and even the name of the person at Western Union who facilitated the money transfer. I found out he was an organized criminal. I also found out he did this between the two countries. I started preparing strike one. Strike one. So for strike one, I printed his face and the face of everyone working for / with him from their online profiles and defrauding people and left hundreds of flyers in his neighborhood. I also called a hotline for financial crime prevention in both the countries and gave very specific details and names. Know that even if he had given me the money, this goes against my core values and I would have done the same thing either way. At this point, I was preparing strike 2 too. Strike 2. I was dumb in lending him money, but at least I did it the right way. I wrote a check. I didn't do cash, I wanted proof, just in case. It would turn out to be a great idea. On the check, I had written that it was a loan. Thank you, Judge Judy, for this tip. Since he didn't pay me back, I prepared an invoice and sent it to me from his hacked email. When the time came to do my taxes, I filed a $25K as an expense using this invoice. I have many freelancers. I slid him as one of them, and it passed. Don't ask me how I got his social security number, I can't remember, but I ended up having access to it, so ratted him out to the IRS for hiding income. I found out later on through friends that the IRS started investigating him for unpaid taxes. I heard he had to pay 38% taxes on that $25K plus pay a 20% fine for not declaring income. At this point, I was satisfied. I figured $9,500 in taxes plus $5K in fines was 50% of what he owed me. At least he didn't get away with it all. But remember, I told you on the check I had written that it was a loan. So I took about 2 to 3 years, but I took him to court and won. He didn't even show up. So he has to reimburse the full $25K plus court fees plus what he owes to the IRS. So it's $39,500 that he was to pay for not reimbursing the $25K. To this day, I still haven't seen a cent, but the rest of the story makes it worthwhile. For a while, I thought the financial crime call I made had no effect. Now that cherry on top. But I didn't know at the time that the IRS would team up with Wire Fraud Division and look at everything he did. They were not able to catch him on the wire fraud, but since the house he had did not fit with the money he was declaring, that got him on tax evasion and gave him a certain delay to pay back taxes. I heard it was only 3 months, but I don't know if it's accurate. They got him so good they ended up freezing his accounts, and he lost his house. The bank foreclosed it, and his debt to the IRS is still open. We are not in the US, so he won't go to jail for this, however. But my $25K that he did not want to repay ended up costing him over $500,000. And since you cannot go bankrupt for a debt you owe to the government, I am happy to tell you that at 40 years old he had to move back with his parents and ask for welfare and will probably be paying this for the rest of his life. Now it's time for a story of mine. For a couple months I have been busy wasting and trolling scammers' time so they get to steal less money from people. These people cold call everyone claiming to be Microsoft, the IRS, that you want a free cruise, or that you won a free gift card. They also use fake pop-ups in web browsers that tell victims their computer is infected by a virus, that your personal information is being hacked, your computer has been blocked, or that your Microsoft/Apple license key has expired. These scammers steal a lot of money this way from mostly elderly people and people that don't have much computer knowledge. The problem is getting bigger and bigger, and these people are great to troll. I have been doing this for a while now, and we are finding a lot of new ways to piss these criminals off. We utilize call flooders to disable their phone lines. We pretend to be victims and use fake virtual computers to connect them in to waste hours and hours of their time. This act of pretending to be the victim is scam baiting. We also find that information on them to report to authorities, although they don't do much, sadly. We had met a lot of scammers change their phone number or shut them down completely by our continuous actions. Now for my revenge story. I was dialing a scammer pretending that my computer had the fake pop-up alert with their number on it. I followed the steps. He told me to make him enter my virtual computer, a safe environment that if they damage I can just restore easily with one button. He was showing me all the fake lies like running the command box, free command to index all your files, and then while it's indexing type a message in there that my PC was infected. He next ran netstat in the command prompt and told me the foreign address of hackers that have established a connection on my machine. At this point, he opened a window called MSInfo32 to look at my system specs. As my virtual machine wasn't made stealthy, I thought he would find out that I'm a pranker, as they usually call us. To my surprise, the scammer was a rookie that didn't even notice at all that it showed VirtualBox in the system model line. I love having rookie scammers on a line, as they are easy to get information on them from, and I had a feeling this call would get something interesting going. A minute later, my feeling became real as he opened his payment account on my virtual machine. As he logged in, I distracted him and clicked on the store passwords, which was displayed in my native language, so he didn't notice he did. Next, I played along his dumb scam a little longer, filled in all the information in the payment form, and while doing so, I disconnected him and pretended my internet went. I quickly went into his account settings and changed the password and hung up the phone call. At first, I thought there weren't any transactions made, but shortly I found out that there are a lot of stolen money made by him. I decided to call them back later and they didn't even understand what happened. They said they had a connection problem for transactions and told me I could pay with iTunes gift cards instead. Sadly, they could still scam people this way, but it's a lot less likely a victim would fall for the iTunes gift card payment thing. All in all, this was a nice setback for them and a good revenge from my side. A couple days later, I can still log into their account and they apparently didn't set up any recovery settings. I couldn't refund the victim, but the information was passed on to authorities. I live in a town where it's common for people to go door to door looking for handyman work. I hired one guy to clean out the crawl space of my house, which had a bunch of stuff left in it by the previous owners. He was always hustling me for extra work, like to take the trash to the dump. I explained that my trash service would pick it up for $1 per bag, far cheaper than what he wanted. He complained that his mother-in-law had stolen his lawnmower and asked to borrow mine to mow the lawns that he mowed. I said alright, but that it had to be returned to me within 2 weeks. This began a long litany of excuses about why he couldn't bring back the lawnmower. I hadn't taken down the serial number, so I couldn't check the pawn shops other than to physically go to each one and look for the mower. The final story was that he and a friend had gotten into an accident, and the owner of the car was in jail for DWI, and the car was at a wrecking yard with a mower in it. I told him that I would need the name of the driver and the name of the jail. He hung up the phone. I reported the theft of my lawnmower and some other garden equipment to the police. Before the case came before the court, he was offered a job. I sent a copy of the police report that I had submitted along with another police report that he was accused of forging a check and elder abuse to the employer, and told him that he might want to consider this information in reconsidering the job offer. The job offer, which would have paid him $40K per year, about double what he was making for full-time handyman work, was withdrawn. He pleaded not contest to the charge of theft and was fined $150 and ordered to pay $400 in restitution. I never got the restitution, but I did file a claim against him in small claims court. Because he did not show up, the judgment was in my favor for about $900, which included court costs and damage that he had done to my lawn. I tried to collect it but couldn't find it. My state allows you to apply 8% interest to uncollected small claims court judgments, and they are active for 6 years. This made the judgment's value grow to $1,428 after 6 years. His name is uncommon, so I listed the bad debt on my tax return for 2018. I received a judgment in my favor in 2013. It's either money, whether the IRS will pursue him for the bad debt, which counts as income for him. When I, 25, female, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name. The account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21, and at that point it contained just over $300K. My grandparents left me a letter saying they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, meaning my full siblings. Dad's a Smith, mom's a Jones. By fairly, they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are dad and stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from my grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing would be to assign each of us $100K, so we all got an equal-sized lump sum. And I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his $100K, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested I buy a house with my $100K. I found a place I loved, but it was $130K and I couldn't get a mortgage. So Dad said I should borrow $30K from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at $208K right now. But due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at 195k, so I still owe 13k. Joe turned 21 recently and as I was giving him his 100k, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained and said I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac and both boys said that I stole from them and owed them the full 13k back plus 3 grand of interest that they felt they would have gotten. And they wanted it all paid by this summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring the account up to 211k. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day I got an email clearly written by them saying that they intend to sue me for that 16k, plus whatever is currently in the account, and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time I'd given Joe about 50k of his 100k because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally, they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they have already received an amount I deem fair. So that 50k was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts, calls, and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal. I blocked them. They then took to social media saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this. And it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, grandparents and me. He showed me that he also had an account with 150k in it, and a scan of a letter from our grandparents saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me we have another half-sibling, who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with a solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris's illegitimate kid fund. And as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones Kids Fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the 50k because it's all they are getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a PM from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris's funds. Chris also said no and told Dad we'd met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and our other half-sibling, with Chris's permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for the children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap but holding firm on my decision, and the boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, stepmom apparently did not know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home, because it looks like she's not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider, but honestly, I am done with all of them, except Chris and my sister.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.